Hey there, I'm Nick from Sigma, and this is a quick video to show you how to shoot your own graduation photos right in your own home. Now, I don't have any teenagers yet, so I'm going to leave the senior portraits to my colleagues. But if you have children in daycare or elementary school, then this video should be helpful. I'll show you how to get that classic school portrait style graduation photo with basic equipment. And we'll even do a little bit of editing so that your photo will be ready to share with friends and family. So this is my home studio / guest room, and these are my two subjects. Danny, who's graduating from kindergarten this year, and Andy, who's finishing up the 4th grade. You ready, boys?
Yay! Whatever.
Okay. First, I'll set up my backdrop. Now, it doesn't have to be 8 feet wide. Kids are small and backdrops can be expensive. But a decent backdrop, especially one that's a neutral gray like this one, can be a very valuable addition to your home studio. If you don't have one, window drapes, a blank wall, anything plain will do. Just make sure that you iron out the wrinkles beforehand. I usually position kids on a stool about 5 to 6 feet away from the backdrop. This gives us the separation we need from the background, makes it easy to light your subject and to fix stray hairs, and it makes kids feel grown up and special, which is exactly the kind of vibe that we want to capture. Now for lights. These are very basic LED lights that I bought online for about $100 a pair. Now, for professional use, they definitely wouldn't make the grade, but for home use, they're perfect. They're diffused, they're daylight balanced, the output is adjustable, and each one of them comes with a light stand and a softbox. And I prefer to use continuous lighting like this because kids typically don't like flashes and we want them to be as comfortable as possible. We'll go with a very simple 3-light setup. One key light just above the child's eye, but not too high, especially if they're wearing a mortarboard. One fill light, a bit dimmer or a little bit further back, that's used to fill in shadows. Or if you don't have that many lights, you can always use a reflector or a piece of white poster board to fill in those shadows. And one backlight placed out of frame to keep the child's shoulders and head from fading into the background. Speaking of backgrounds, if you have an extra light, consider lighting the background, and even better, put a gel on that light to light up the background with your child's favorite color to give that portrait a little bit of extra personalization. One last thing about lighting, make sure that there's no other lights in the area that will contaminate your shooting space. For example, if you have a lamp in the corner with a different color temperature, a little bit warmer for example, make sure you turn it off so that it doesn't cause problems with the color in your shot. Make sure that the only lights are the ones that you're using. For your camera gear, any camera body will do, but lens choice is important. On a full-frame camera like this Sony a7 III, this Sigma 85mm f1.4 art lens is perfect. Now if you don't have a prime lens like this, that's okay, a zoom lens will be fine, but make sure that you keep an eye on your focal length. That's the important part. For full-frame cameras, stay around 85mm, and for crop sensor cameras, 55mm is ideal. Now if space is limited and you can't shoot at 85mm, just try to stay as far away from your subject as possible. Wide-angle shots don't make for very flattering portraits, and you don't want to see the edges of your background, so keep an eye on your focal length. By the way, when it comes to photographing kids in studio, I think a tripod is essential. Yes, it's faster to run and gun and shoot handheld, but I always get better results when I can put my camera on a tripod and I can focus on making the child smile. Besides, I won't be using flash in this situation, so we need to keep camera movement to a minimum. That way we get sharper results. Alright, time for props. Do you have your cap and gown, diploma, bouquet of flowers? Make sure that you get those things ironed, tied up, trimmed, whatever it is you need to do beforehand, because you don't want to do it when you've got a squirmy 6-year-old ready to roll. Speaking of which, let's get started. With your nicely dressed subject in place, check your lighting, check for any obvious shadows, but don't ask for any smiles yet. Have a nice chat while you get your exposure dialed in. So Andy, what's new in the world of, I don't know, Pokemon or something?
Meowth can use Thunderbolt. He's been wasting his life this whole time with Team Rocket.
Thunderbolt, huh? You don't say.
I do say.
For settings, you should put your camera in manual exposure mode so that your exposure is consistent throughout the entire session. Start with a shutter speed of about 1/100th of a second because kids tend to move a lot, and even when they're sitting still, they drift around all over the place. So you definitely want to have a fast shutter speed. And by the way, if your camera has eye detect autofocus, make use of it. There's absolutely no shame in putting eye detect AF on and putting your camera in continuous autofocus mode. It helps a lot. Now I usually leave my camera in ISO auto, but some cameras handle noise better than others, so you might want to set it manually. If your lights are bright enough, then feel free to drop it down to 100. You can always raise your ISO a little bit more if your exposure is too dark. As for aperture, this is a completely aesthetic choice, but try to avoid the temptation of shooting at f1.4, 1.8, f2 if you have a lens like this. Try to go at f4, 5.6, or even higher than that because you want to get your entire subject's face in focus rather than just their eyeball. So take a few test shots, see what you like, but I rarely go with a very shallow depth of field for shoots like this. By the way, when you're composing your photographs, don't forget to leave some extra room around the edges. Now, it might not feel right because, after all, it looks good in the monitor, but if you want to print your pictures, you may need to do some cropping to adjust for the different aspect ratios, so make sure that you leave plenty of room. Alright, now at this point, we're ready to make him smile, which admittedly is not an easy thing to do. But in my experience, I find that laughter is the best medicine. So yes, while you want them to sit up straight and carry their diploma a certain way, what's really important is that reaction on their face. So if you can act goofy or tell some bad jokes, you're bound to catch some genuine smiles in there. And that's where your camera's burst mode comes in really handy. And sometimes if you call attention to it, your children will even find that funny. So feel free to set it to full blast and fire away. Of course, depending on the kid or how long you've been messing around with your aperture, you might not be getting any smiles at all. So it's best to come prepared with some kind of incentive.
You mean a bribe, Daddy?
Okay, a bribe. Now with older kids, the promise of candy or ice cream after the shoot is usually enough. But with little ones, you need to keep them motivated throughout the shoot, so bring along some snacks. Now little bite-sized things work great, but try to avoid things like chocolate or red or blue lollipops or goldfish crackers, anything that'll cause a bunch of crumbs or stain their front teeth. As you're shooting, try not to get stuck with just one or two poses. Try as much as you possibly can before your child loses patience. Tilt their head up, tilt it down, look at this light, look at this one, hold their diploma this way, no diploma, teeth, no teeth, try everything you can. After all, memory cards are cheap and they have plenty of room on them, and this is how you learn. So, your kids will forgive you. Eventually. Now once you have a good batch of photos to choose from, it's time to hit the editing room. Now I always shoot in RAW, so I have a little bit more flexibility with my photos, but if you shot in JPEG, that's okay too. Either way, transfer all your pictures over to your computer and open your favorite editing program. I happen to like Lightroom, but there's plenty of other options out there, some of which are free. So depending on how many shots you took, you'll definitely have some options, but the challenge here is to import the best 2 or 3 to edit. You really don't want to have a whole bunch of pictures to process that all kind of look the same. The goal here is to find one shot, your child's graduation photo, and let that one image represent this moment in his or her life. In my opinion, at least, that makes it that much more special. Okay, so I'm going to choose this picture of Daniel, and I'm just going to do a little bit of editing. So I'm going to just straighten it out a little bit. I'm not going to crop too much because I don't want to take away too much space. I want to be able to print this out as an 8x10, so I think that's perfect. Okay, so I'm going to up the exposure just a touch, not too much. Give it a little bit more contrast. Sorry, it's time for lunch. Give it a little bit of a cooler temperature, and I'm going to bring down some of the yellow tones on his skin just a touch. A little bit of extra vibrance for the background. Bring down the red just a tiny bit. And I think I'm going to add a little bit of vignetting so that I can put, there we go, the focus is a little bit more on him. Now you can see that if we get in real close that this is very sharp. This is shot at f4 at 1/60th of a second, so even though he was moving around a little bit, it's still super sharp. And at ISO 800, that's fine. There's really no noise in the background. You can see just a touch of noise on the backdrop, so we can remove that by adding just a little bit of noise reduction, maybe about 20. There, that's good, and that smooths out the noise and looks much better. And if we zoom out, I mean, that's pretty much done. Because I was able to do my lighting beforehand and make sure my exposure was all dialed in before I actually sat him down, I really don't have to do much with this picture. It's pretty much done. Maybe I'll just take down the highlight just a little bit. Maybe boost up the shadows just a little bit. Yeah. Nope. Yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect. You can always tweak more. But I think I'm pretty happy with the way this turned out. Now at this point, I'm going to create two different versions. One uncropped version that I can use for prints, like 8x10s and other print sizes, and a cropped version that I'll put on my phone or I can share on Facebook or other digital platforms. And there you have it. One for the frame, one for the phone. Now all this might seem like a lot of work for one graduation photo, and that's true. You could certainly just take your phone out and snap a pic and be done with it. But the time and the care that you put into producing this one simple photograph can be more than just a picture and a bunch of thumbs up emojis. It can be an experience, one that invokes memories of a time where you had no choice but to make your own graduation portrait, and you did a damn good job. Thanks for watching.